Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Today's guest, Hillary Morgan Ferrer, I like that, so three-word name, may not yet know that I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving, but she will find out. Those who are new to this webcast should be aware this is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged or by our satire. Today is June 11, 2019, and it is broadcast number 148. This week, we are joined by Mama Bear Apologetics' very own Hillary Morgan Ferrer to talk about their new book, Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies. My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
Hey, I don't even know if it's a safe space for us in here. You know,
No.
I need to go find a safe space when I come in here. I think the corner over there is where you're going to see me next. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw his shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. So, our sponsors for this broadcast include the Grievance Industrial Complex, because things are never bad enough already. And Where's the Outrage, the game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they're white males. And if you enjoy this broadcast, or if it really annoys you and you would like to inflict it on somebody else to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. So far, our program still has not been listed among the sponsors of global terrorism. So I guess we're doing
That's because we don't have a big enough following.
We've managed to stay off that list, and it's probably because we're called the Unknown Webcast, and they don't know how to find us.
That could be, yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting because I knew John, who you're kind of familiar with, Hillary. He's written some articles for our journal, and
my husband, yes, just for people who don't know.
He has
I'm glad you're familiar with your husband.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
We don't discourage it.
Then we realize that he has a really smart and challenging wife in Hillary, who loves apologetics and has a passion for the kids.
Now, is that a sexist comment to call her challenging? I mean, we got to clarify every term we use, otherwise it might be.
I don't have to. I'm a racist white male. I don't have to clarify anything. Okay. You get what you get.
I'm trying to think if John would call me challenging or not. I know that's probably one of the things that oddly enough, that's one of the things he appreciates the most about me. It's like, I cannot tell you how many times we've been in the middle of some disagreement where we're debating back and forth, and he just stops and gets these like super gooey, lovey-dovey eyes, and he says, I love that I can't just bulldoze you over. And so not many men would appreciate that.
Well, I think I understand his appreciation of that. I think I really do. Yeah, it's a really good thing. I mean, you are it sounds like you're a formidable partner in conversation.
Well, and that's important. Joy and I are married. We'll be married 49 years this September. We dated 3 years before that. And she's definitely smarter than I am. But fortunately for me, she doesn't like to be out in public very much. She's happier writing behind a computer screen. And I am happier taking what she's written and going out and pretending like I thought of it. So we work well together.
Sounds like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I think it was, absolutely. And there's a whole story behind that, which we won't go into today. But we're going to talk about your newest book, your newest adventure with the other Mama Bears.
Yes.
Tell me why you felt like this book needed to be done.
Well, actually, so kind of funny you should ask that. We had Harvest House approach us about a book originally. And so Natasha Crane had just released, I can't remember if she had just released her second book or if it was her first book. And so I knew I didn't want to duplicate efforts with her in terms of, I didn't want to write a book that had all, it's just like, oh, there's, 10 different books you can read on the same subject and, just pick which one you want. I wanted to write something that I thought was truly unique. And so first off, I immediately wanted to make it a group project, just because I think the spirit of Mama Bear in general is just women banding together and working together and as a team. So I kind of started sketching out some ideas and just prayed about it, and went with the team, and we brainstormed a bunch of different ideas, but it really came back down to this idea of these cultural lies. And I had also called Natasha and talked to her. I said, I don't want to duplicate your book. What are some of the things that you wish you could write about, but you don't feel like you have the time? Because she already had a couple of future books that were planned out. So it was a very strategic choice of topics. And the reason why we picked this was, I think a lot of apologetics is dealing with answers to specific questions, and especially the books that are geared towards parents. It's geared towards answers to specific questions. But what I wanted to do was say, where are those questions coming from? It's like those questions aren't coming out of a vacuum. That those questions are coming from somewhere. And a lot of times it's a faulty worldview that those questions are coming from in the first place. And so I thought, I really want to address kind of the things that culture is telling our kids that are making them ask some of these tough questions in the first place. And so I brainstormed some stuff, and then I got on with the other ladies who I had asked to do this project with me. And we just kind of brainstormed about what we saw as being some of the biggest issues in culture right now. And so we had a lot of chapters. We had to whittle it down significantly. And even in the middle of writing it, we had to actually scrap one of our chapters and add another chapter because which I'll talk about when we get to that chapter. There was one chapter that was not planned that actually emerged in the writing process. So
maybe you have enough for a volume 2 then. Say, who came up? Now, I have to say, when I look at this promo, that it looks like it's for the pre-order period that you had.
Yeah.
That hashtag, roar like a mother. Number 1, I want to know who came up with it. Number 2, I am genuinely afraid to do a search on that.
I believe it was Hillary Short that said it. She is hilarious.
Yeah, it's a scary hashtag. I think I'm going to hesitate before. Yeah, it should have a parental advisory. So, go ahead.
I was going to say it had just enough sass. There wasn't anything, wrong. But also it's
extremely cute.
Yes, and also the roar is the method that we use in I believe it's chapter 3, that we talk about how do you go through the discernment process, and we have the acronym ROAR for discernment. Yeah. So it's kind of got a double meaning to it.
Oh, so it's been 1 week. I mean, you're celebrating your 1 week anniversary.
Yeah, it actually is. Yeah, Tuesday.
It was released a week ago today. So that's exciting. And this is a table of contents, and I thought we'd kind of use it as a template.
Okay. Before we get too far with that, I want to jump in and say something before we get too far with that.
Okay.
Here's one of the reasons why I like this idea. Joy and I, as we raised our kids, we used everything to teach about worldviews. Mm-hmm. We talked to the television. We talked to the we talked to the radio.
And they didn't commit you.
Yeah, and my son would get so exasperated, he'd go, "Mom, you're always trying to get to the point of everything," which is true. Why? Because, as you point out, your worldview is being shaped. I think, and I've said this before, Ron's heard me say this, I think most have their worldview shaped by osmosis. It drifts in from the outside. You get ideas that you don't know where they came from, and they're not being well addressed because most parents are too busy trying to take little Susie and little Johnny to soccer practice, to baseball practice, to school, to whatever, and they feel overwhelmed by how do I address these issues that is bombarding their worldview. They don't even think about that.
We're acculturated into our worldview. And anything. So, anything else before we continue?
I like this because I think it is helpful, and it makes it a little simpler for mom, especially, to understand. Not that women are not intelligent. I think they are enormously intelligent. I think they are overwhelmed
Yes.
by so much
And
other stuff
busy.
that's going on. Yes.
Yeah.
Extremely busy.
Yeah, I mean, how do you have time to, unless somebody else has gone through this? So, I mean, I like the layout of your table of contents, and I just thought I could just ask, like, okay, here's your first chapter. Now, I'm looking, I see a foreword by Nancy Piercy. That's great. And we talked a little bit about protecting your kids the Mama Bear way, which, can you give us a few words about that first?
Yeah, so I wanted to address the idea of protection first, because this is something that the women had when we first saw the cover. We were a little unsure about it because it looked like it looked a little too much like the Mama Bear was sheltering, and we wanted to say we're not sheltering our kids. And so we thought, I was like, let's make a kind of an intro to discuss what we are meaning when we're talking about protecting our kids. And so that's where we decided to do that. But it also gives a real good preface to the book in terms of, I go through all the things that, here, let me just read some of the parts in there of why is this important. So think of ideas as being like seeds. Whether or not a seed grows is determined by the kind of soil it is placed in and whether or not we water it. We want to nurture our children's intellectual soil so that when, not if, bad ideas are planted there, they just won't grow. We don't want our kids to feel like they have to choose between God and science, because we have already made an effort to till their intellectual soil so that they know that science and faith are not at odds and never were, chapter 6. We don't want our kids to look to government as their savior, because they know that the battle has already been won by Christ and he alone is their savior, chapter 13. We want them to know what constitutes trustworthy evidence so that they can never claim that there is no evidence for God, chapter 7. We want them to understand that truth is exclusive. It excludes falsehood, chapter 11. These principles are foundational to everything Scripture teaches. Allow the foundation to erode, and we leave our kids prey to doubt and worldly thinking. After all, how can our little bears accept the truth of Christ unless they already know that truth itself exists and is not up for interpretation, chapter 8? Or how will they know to reach out to Jesus for help if they are taught that all they need to do is look inside, that everything that they need resides within, chapter 5? So I think it gives like this idea of what are the specific issues that these ideas are targeting, and how is it undercutting a kid having those questions in the first place? How can we get on top of it instead of reacting? We're being proactive.
Yeah. So I have to admit, when I first saw this, calling all Mama Bears, chapter 1, my kid has a Cheerio shoved up his nose. Why am I reading this book? As a guy, that's when I put the book down.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's when a kid has a Cheerio shoved up his nose, that's when I say, okay, go talk to your mother. But actually, yeah, that's just the male chauvinist coming out of me. It's a great title. I'm just thinking, yes, this is a book for mothers. This is obviously, mothers encounter this kind of. I mean, not that dads don't encounter it. It's just
they say, go see your mother.
either that, or they go, or we'll actually stick two up our own nose.
Well, they'll say, yeah, how many can I get up my nose?
Just
to show them how to do it.
We can show them. We can do it better than they can.
Yes, the difference in parenting is very stark.
So what did you tell the people? I mean, your readers, is the purpose of reading the book here?
So I co-authored this chapter with Julie Lose. I have worked on something called the Youth Exodus for several years, and it's looking at causes and solutions, reason why kids are leaving the church, and it gives a lot of the statistics. So there's, the only statistic that most people know, and nobody knows who said it first, is that it's like between 70 to 80% of kids after they leave high school end up leaving the church. But we looked at a whole lot of other statistics of saying, what are kids actually believing? And, do they actually believe that Jesus was both God and man? Because, questions like that actually matter. If you are claiming to be a Christian, we can't just judge whether or not kids are leaving the church based on how many of them are attending church. We have to look at what the kids who claim to believe in God and believe in Christianity, what are they actually saying they believe? And so we do a real in-depth look. We do a couple things. We do an in-depth look at the youth exodus and the statistics. We look at some of the, I would say, misconceptions regarding it. And then I kind of give a little bit of a personal testimony as to what apologetics did for my faith. Because I think if you don't have a vision, if you don't have a vision for why apologetics can help your kid, because I was introduced to apologetics when I was 12. And so I can credit my entire walk with Christ from then on out being really based on the fact that I understood that I couldn't get around the evidences for the resurrection. So no matter what else happened in my life, I felt like I had to check my brain at the door to not believe. And to me, that it's like, if I were to rely on emotions as the thing that kind of kept me in the faith, it would have been gone a long time ago. And so it's like, it's not just saying in hindsight, I wish I'd known this. It's saying, here's a testimony from someone who this changed their life. And so just encouraging moms to say, this could be your kid.
Yeah. So like, okay, so we have this next chapter by Hillary Short. Is this code for being the weirdest mom on the playground, being a mama bear? Well, without giving away too much, I mean, do you feel like you are, when you are focused on apologetics like that and concerned about your child's worldview, which is really the real issue, and their salvation and their ability to hold on to their faith in the face of attacks, does it really make you feel like the weirdest mom on the playground sometime?
Some of the things that we have in here, I think, are preempting things that sometimes excuses that someone might already give for not wanting to get involved in this. Like someone saying, oh, I don't want to have to go and talk about my faith, and then everybody knows, stay away from that, mom. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek preempting the thoughts that they might not even be voicing to themselves, and kind of helping them laugh at themselves. It's like we try to infuse humor as much as possible.
I wonder if you've accomplished that with the refined art of chew and spit. What is this? The discerning mama bear, the refined art of chew and spit. Yeah.
So chew and spit is a theme that we have throughout the whole book, and that's the.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Uh-oh. Hillary, can you hear us?
Hillary froze up. She mentioned that they have some technological challenges there. I
just saw a movement.
I saw a movement, so she's working on it.
Oh,
there she is.
You're back.
Okay. I don't know why it froze. I'm hardwired into the router, so yeah, it just happens.
Okay, so were you chewing and spitting? Maybe that's what did it.
Yeah, I just didn't want y'all to see me kind of okay. So the refined art of chew and spit is based on the idea that we can find good and bad in almost everything. And it kind of critiques this idea. And this is, I've heard a lot of people my age. I honestly can't remember if I grew up like this or not. I don't think I did. I think I kind of monitored myself in a lot of ways. I was harsher on myself than even my parents were. But there were a lot of people who grew up that the things were categorized as this is bad and this is good, or this is Christian, this is non-Christian, or this is safe and this is dangerous. And as long as you categorize something correctly, then you can basically turn your brain off. So the idea of chewing and spitting is saying that there's a phrase, I'm going to see if I can remember it, that there is no Christian so theologically sound that you're not going to get a piece of heresy from them at some point. And there is no atheist so bad that you're not going to get a nugget of truth from them at some point. And so this idea of what happens is sometimes kids were taught, oh, this is bad, this is dangerous. And then they go off, and of course, when they're in college, they start exploring all this stuff for themselves. And they start discovering that there's some things that are good, that are true, that are beautiful, and in the things that they were told this is bad. And at that point, they feel lied to. And so they say, well, if they lied to me about this, what else did they lie to me about? And so it's really training parents to say, you need to teach your kids that it doesn't matter if they're listening to a sermon or music or a movie, that you need to be looking at it and taking the good and rejecting the bad, because you're going to have both in almost everything.
You are. One of Joy's lines that she does in her articles from time to time is, just because you heard it from the pulpit doesn't mean it isn't really stupid.
Well,
Can I give an example of that, please?
Sure.
Okay, so
only one?
No, I'm sure I've got more than that. This one, oh my gosh, this because so I don't know if I've got my master's in biology, so I love science. And I was listening to a podcast, and I won't say what church it was from. I just decided to pick a podcast from a church that was in my area back when I lived somewhere else. And from the pulpit, he was saying basically that logic in science, it's like that Satan is the prince of this world. So any kind of evidence that we find in the world, whose domain is that? Well, it's Satan's, because he's the prince of this world. And I was just sitting there going, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's
and I was thinking also of a story I read in Garrison Keillor's Lake Woebegone Days book. He was raised, a lot of it's really very autobiographical. He was raised in a very conservative Christian home, and he's by no means a conservative Christian anymore. And he talks about, how everything, that what you were just talking about. There are good things, there are bad things. If it's in the world, it's a bad thing. If it's otherwise, it's a good thing. And so the question came up, what kind of music can I listen to? And he asked his parents, well, how about Mozart and Beethoven? And they looked at him and said, I don't know. Were they Christians?
Oh.
And it's like,
yes, it's like,
right. And frankly, that's, we encountered that even with Bill Gothard. There was bad classical music.
Classical music?
Oh, yeah.
Not even sure how. Sure. Okay.
Pretty much anything after beginning in the 18th century, I think, wasn't that great in his opinion, but that would take us forever. So you talk about linguistic theft, and this, I'm thinking, wow, this is going on right now in our society at large, but it also happens a lot in cults.
Yeah, absolutely.
It happens a lot in places, among people like Gothard. In culture today, we are being told, and they're trying to ingrain this so much that maybe one day the dictionary will agree with them. But so far, I have not seen it happen.
Well, for cults, I've seen the dictionary change.
Well, but one word that's still a holdout, maybe it'll change soon, is the word racism. So racism is defined as the belief that one race is superior to another, race, ethnic groups, whatever.
That's going to change probably soon. I'm guessing, just because that is being redefined.
For the last 30 years, or 30 or more years, left-wing people have been trying to define it as prejudice plus power, which really trivializes it, really.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk a little bit about this linguistic theft phenomenon?
So linguistic theft is, I try to think of what to call this, because it's kind of a version of the equivocation fallacy, but it's a little bit more than that. So here's how I define it in the book. I say linguistic theft is much more sinister than just the evolution of language. Linguistic theft refers to purposefully hijacking words, changing their definitions, and then using those same words as tools of propaganda. And so it's this idea, and the one that I would say is specifically really dangerous, especially for our kids, is taking words that are used favorably in scripture, changing the definition to fit the agenda of the worldly secular agenda, and then saying, well, your Bible says you're supposed to love. Right. This is what love is. Right. Why aren't you loving? And how confusing is that for kids sitting there going, yeah, it does say I'm supposed to love. And, we find all sorts of things about the justice of God, but the word justice has been hijacked. And this idea, we don't see the word tolerant necessarily as much we definitely don't see that in the Old Testament. There's, a lot of intolerance in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, when it comes to unity within the church, it's got the concept of tolerance under the banner of unity. And so that's one of the ones that I specifically kind of harp on in here, is this idea of what happens when we change the word tolerate. And so I say, thankfully, the Oxford Dictionary has not been rewritten yet, and tolerance is still defined as the ability or willingness to tolerate the existence of opinions or behaviors that one dislikes or disagrees with. So according to the actual definition, for tolerance to exist, there must be dislike and disagreement. And I cannot stress to you enough the importance of repeating this to your children on a regular basis. Whenever you hear someone talking about intolerance, ask your kids, are they asking for people to accept their belief as equally true or to live with them in peace despite disagreement? That's a really critical distinction.
It is, and definitions are important. They're key to understanding anything. As Ron pointed out, cults have done this for generations. A talk I frequently do in cult conferences and churches is dealing with the definition of Jesus, because talk about loving Jesus, they talk about being born again, they talk about being saved by grace. Muslims talk about loving Jesus. Christian Science talks about loving Jesus. Jehovah's Witnesses talk about loving Jesus. But when you look at their definitions, what you discover is none of them line up with what Scripture says about who Jesus is. So if you don't add, it isn't where we agree, yes, we all love Jesus, it's where we disagree. What are the definitions that you're using?
And a lot of the linguistic theft that we have going on really is based on anger. It's based on grievances. And we have a sponsor who is ready to come up and help you with that problem. If you need help with it. Recently, in an emergency meeting at the Toxico Corporation, the project lead, Stu, said these protests are delaying the project and killing our bottom line. Foreman Larry said, all this over a few million dead fish? PR spokesperson Pam said, yeah, we're the real victims here. Across town, a hedge fund manager consults with his lawyer. I feel so left out of the culture wars. I can't afford to be left behind. But where do I find the right victim status to bring me the professional success I'm looking for? Meanwhile, Phil is meeting with his career counselor. I've come to the point where I realize I don't have enough intersectionality on my resume. Do you think I should consider gender reassignment surgery to boost my career prospects? Now there's a solution for all these problems. It's the grievance industrial complex. It's the premier manufacturer and recycler of fine grievance products, provides grievances customized for your political, economic, and social goals, and it works closely with you throughout the design and implementation process to ensure your satisfaction. It includes our patented moral high ground, which includes a victim status designed just for you, identity politics, tactics, flawless far-left ideology, and so much more. And with every new I'm going to have a hard time getting through this one. For every new customer, free for a limited time, the Total Morons Guide to Playing the Victim Card for Terrorists, the #1 guide to making fools of the Western mainstream media, says Mustafa Birnow, the certified terrorist. And it's even better than the Harry Potter series, says Dr. S.J.W. Jones, professor of applied abstractions at the Department of Ephemeral Studies. The grievance industrial complex, because things are never bad enough already. So
And there you go.
Yeah, Thank you for that important sponsor.
That's what we do. The what you said about the language theft being a variation on the equivocation fallacy, just so that our listeners know what that means. It means using a word in two different senses usually in order to draw always to draw a false conclusion if you're using the fallacy. So equivocation, some words have two different senses or many different senses, just about everywhere. Look up just about anywhere in the dictionary and you might find some 3 or 4 disparate definitions.
Yeah.
Take the word scale, for instance. You can scale a mountain, you can scale a fish. There are scales on fish. You weigh yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, so on.
Man, English is a confusing language.
Yeah, sorry. Well, if you want to be even more confused, I like to illustrate the equivocation fallacy by asking the question, which is better, complete happiness or a ham sandwich? And people say, well, I don't know, maybe complete happiness. And I say, no, it's a ham sandwich. Well, why do you say that? Well, because nothing is better than complete happiness, and a ham sandwich is better than nothing.
Okay, I see where you're going here.
So we've used the word nothing in 2 totally different senses, and it makes it funny, but it's also an equivocation, and it's a fallacy. So. but people are doing this all the time in very subtle ways in order to disturb the faith of Christians.
Yeah, I would say the main difference between the equivocation and linguistic theft is equivocation still leaves room for the previous definition, versus I think linguistic theft is trying to do an all-around change of the definition of the word. And I think Holly Ordway has a really good quote about this.
Okay.
She says, once language becomes routinely distorted, it becomes increasingly easy to justify and promote evil while at the same time hiding behind positive words.
So you're talking not just about using already accepted definitions of terms and playing a little shell game with them, but you're talking about completely redefining, like when they redefine racism as, power plus prejudice, prejudice plus power, instead of just going with the standard dictionary definition of believing one racial group or ethnic or whatever group is superior to another. So,
yeah, and can I unpack that just for a second for the listeners?
Yes.
This idea of bringing the power aspect into the idea of racism, and I actually encountered this when I was a teacher, and I worked with a lot of gang kids at a disciplinary school. The idea of adding power into the definition of racism is saying that whoever has more power as a group, basically they can be racist, but the people below them, since they don't have power, they can't be racist. So it's basically saying if you are in a minority or considered oppressed group, you by definition cannot be racist because you don't have the power. So you can be as discriminatory as you want. You can hate whites as much as you want. It doesn't matter. You can think you're a racist superior, but it's not racism by their definition.
Right. Which is why, in their view, if an African American person took up a gun and shot white people because they were white, even though that's an act of power, and even though he had all the power in that situation, he had the gun. Mm-hmm. They will still say he didn't have. It couldn't be racism because he did not have the cultural power, or the oppression, the power to oppress. They play with the idea of power.
Well, they also play with the idea of individuality, and it's no longer an individual responsible for their own attitudes and actions. It is now your group identity, and it depends on the group. If that group has less power, then if you're a member of that group, then you automatically get to qualify under that. We actually addressed that a little bit in the Marxism chapter.
Yeah. So you have another section called Lies You've Probably Heard. And that it begins with an article by T.C. Cannon. Did I pronounce her name correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. God helps those who helps themselves. This is a pretty old one. What can you tell us?
So the self-helpism, we use that phrase because the more contemporary definition, which I believe we include in the chapter, is therapeutic moralistic deism, which is a bit more of a mouthful. And so self-helpism is this idea that we are seeing happen in a lot of literature, and even in Christian literature, where it's taking principles that one might say these are good principles, psychological principles for maybe working out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's that sanctification process, but it's taking the psychology and it's taking the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's completely leaving the gospel out of it. And so it's also this idea of you need to look within to find the answers. I cannot even tell you the amount of literature, and especially we felt that like this chapter was especially important to include in a book for moms, because a lot of the women, the people that are considered the most popular women's writers, definitely not all of them, but there are enough that sneak in there, are really promoting this idea of either just you need to look within yourself to find the answers, or this is what all you need to do in order to kind of dig yourself out of the rut that you're in, or this is how to have better self-care. And it's all this stuff which isn't necessarily bad, but it is not first pointing people towards the one who created our souls. And so
where's grace? Where's grace? Where is our genuine, yes, there are certain things we can do for ourselves, and no doubt about it. But that's not those are not our most basic problems.
Yes, exactly.
And our most basic problem is something we cannot help ourselves with.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's kind of what the premise of that chapter is trying to get back, making the main thing.
So I want to tell you this right here. This is the title that bothered me the most.
Okay? Oh, really?
Because I didn't think of it. That's my brain is trustworthy, according to my brain. Actually, I think I did hear a comedian say that once. So in other words, it sounds familiar, but I'm just jealous because I didn't think of it. That's the problem I have with it. It's so true, though. We are. How do you even improve on that? That's just great. I'll let you talk about it. Go ahead.
So I actually can't take credit for that. I saw, and I honestly tried to find where I had seen this before. It was like some meme a while ago, years ago, that I saw, and I immediately, it's like my soul just grabbed onto it. And I was like, I love this.
Yes, I think it might have been Emo Phillips.
I don't know.
He was a strange, odd comedian, and he would. Sounds like something he would say, but I don't know. It could be somebody else.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to use that one for naturalism just because I loved it so much, because I think it really does get the point across in such a brief span of time. Right. Just such a brief snippet. Right. It really gets the point.
I mean, I would write a whole book just to include this as a chapter title. Or maybe even make this the title of the book. I don't know. Yeah, I would then write the book around it. Something's got to go with this. So I believe in God if there were any shred of evidence. Oh, I love that one. If there was even the slightest shred of evidence, I have my own strategy for dealing with this. What is yours?
So this one is it's kind of sad because I have heard people say this so many times. My husband, John, we call him the atheist magnet. It doesn't matter where we go, the atheist or agnostic. We could be at a church picnic. He will sit next to the one agnostic in the whole place. And so.
Oh, do we lose her again? Oh, we'll get her back. We got her back last time.
We'll give her a moment. This is one that I like as well because, as you know, I grew up as an atheist. So.
Okay.
There she is. Yes, you are.
I've been just unplugging the router and then plugging it back in, so maybe that's going to help.
I think so.
So John sits down next to the agnostic that's at the church picnic.
I think she froze again.
I think she froze again.
While she's unfreezing, I will say that my approach to this is to say, when they say if there were any shred of evidence, I say, you mean any shred of evidence that you're not ignoring?
Exactly.
Okay, you missed my one-liner here. My response would be, if they say I believe in God, if there were any shred of evidence, I'd say, you mean if there were any shred of evidence you weren't deliberately ignoring?
Yeah, that's kind of so in this chapter we actually we start out with a story about Bart Ehrman, because I believe that he's one of the you'll have to just read the chapter for that. But what we do is we go into the difference between the old atheists and the new atheists.
Right.
Which I think is an incredibly important thing. But also there's some linguistic theft taking place in this chapter as well in the definition of atheism.
Right.
And that this is what you'll see. And one of our main points in this is, so the old atheists, they were pretty honest, and they said, we believe there's no God. And so if a Christian came along and said, well, I believe there is a God, well, you can have a discussion about that. With the new atheism, the new definition of atheism is I lack God belief. And so
I'm sorry, say that again.
I lack God belief.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that I'm making an objective claim that there is no God. They're just saying I lack God belief. It's a completely subjective statement. And so if you're gonna, I actually chart this out in the chapter of what these debates should look like. So the old one, there is no God. The pro position, there is no God. Con position, there is a God. Okay, you can have a debate. Well, if we take the I lack God belief as the pro position, the con position is you don't lack God belief. That is not a debate that could ever happen. And so what I see happening with Christians is the new atheist, I lack God belief. The con position turns into there is a God. And these are two different debates. You cannot have these debates, and I cannot emphasize how many Christians are not seeing this shift and seeing that they're having a completely different debate than what the person is proposing. And so I'm just...
Well, wouldn't one way around that be, why do you lack God belief?
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's not an intellectually honest position, because no one accepts debates, you know, formal debates, or writes books on something they lack belief in. They're making claims, but they're just masking their claim and saying that the burden of proof is completely on the Christian. Then they sit back with their arms folded and said, okay, change my mind, you know, kind of thing.
And my response to that, well, I don't know. I'm not saying my response is the right one. It probably depends on what I had for breakfast that day, what my exact, in a context and all that. But I would say, you know, I get back to showing them that, well, you're just, you know, ignoring.
Well, and sometimes the question is, if I can demonstrate to you that God does exist, would you believe?
Mm-hmm.
Right. If they say no, then I just want to go, let's have coffee and forget about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Right? Because they're really, as you pointed out, it's not an honest objection.
No.
Right.
I lack God belief is not an honest debate. It's not even really an honest position. It's just saying, I don't know. That's all it's saying.
And sometimes it is a belief that they cannot be persuaded.
Yes.
It's really what it is. And there's pride in that. In other words, I believe that my unbelief is so strong that you can't do anything about it. I dare you.
And that's kind of the thesis of this chapter, that for someone who's hyper skeptic and who has bought into this hyper skepticism, that the evidence isn't the problem.
Right. It's the will. So, here we go. The truth, there is no truth. You can't handle there's no truth. Okay. Go ahead. Have at this one.
Are you talking to me? Or?
Oh, yeah. Are you talking to me?
Okay, you're talking to me. Okay. So this is one of the ones where truth, this you will see in every kid's programming. You'll see it on T-shirts. You'll see it on jewelry. You'll see it on everything. And that's putting a possessive pronoun in front of the word truth.
Your truth, my truth.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so we need to recognize that if our kids are not thinking that there is the truth, that truth if they don't even believe that truth can be known, then trying to tell them that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life actually really makes no sense whatsoever. And so this is one of those ones that I think is super important to be able to explain to our kids. Let me see if I have a passage that's I feel like there's maybe I didn't mark anything on this.
I mean, obviously, you know, if I promise my child ice cream for dinner, and then they ask for the ice cream after dinner, and I say, what do you mean? We're not having ice cream. And they say, well, you said we were going to. And I said, well, that's your truth. They're going to eventually figure out that really they can't live by that.
Yeah.
They can't live by that idea. And so now the question is, can you live by the idea that there is no truth to be known about that which is beyond our five senses? Because that's what they're really talking about. You know?
And I think I found the passage that I was looking for.
Sure.
This is where I think that it gets very, it helps parents understand why this is so important. So I say, friend, as you talk with your children about important issues, you must understand the difference between something being wrong and something being wrong for me. When you tell them Christianity is true, their postmodern mindset might be tacking on a silent for you at the end of that statement. When you say that something is true or right or wrong, they may agree for now. You might even see them dutifully nodding in agreement. However, if you don't get a handle on this postmodernism thing early, you might end up with a teenager or 20-something who's completely respectful of all your views. They are fine with those things being true for you and not for them. If they have uncritically absorbed the lies of postmodernism, they will enter their young adult years trying to figure out their truth to build on, all the while being totally respectful of yours. Until you try to claim that your truth should be theirs, then you'll have pushback.
So one way around it that occurs to me, I don't know how effective it would be to modify our language, to try to speak theirs or something they will understand. and just say Christianity is true for everyone.
Yeah.
And of course, the next thing they'll say, well, how can it be true for the Buddhist? He doesn't believe in it. But it is still true for him, because one day the Buddhist will stand before the judgment seat of Christ and answer for his unbelief. And
right. Well, and sometimes it's a question
Y'all
of
hear
walking.
that sound?
yeah, I heard that sound. I think it's coming from Don.
Don, you
It
just
is
like
coming from-
you just pushed a button and it sounded like a jet engine.
Oh yeah, sound like you're taking an elevator or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll turn it back off in a minute, but I just wanted to say that sometimes when we're talking with Wiccans who want to say that your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and they might be totally in opposition, but they're still both true, then we can ask them, okay, is it wrong to burn witches? Now,
That's a great question. What is your answer to that, Don?
yeah, well, they want to come back and go, well, they're, of course it's wrong because there's the Wiccan Rede of 3, and harm none, do as you will. I go, well, okay, but that's only true for you. It's not necessarily true for me. Maybe my truth is it's good to, me and some of my buddies go down to Chicago and grab a couple of witches and beat them up and drag them behind my car and then burn them.
I'm waiting for
This got dark real fast.
Yeah, I'm waiting for. Yeah, but Don, we need a trigger warning here, Don.
The point is not that we want to do that, because we don't. We do think it's wrong to burn witches. The point is they need to come to grips with some things are just true, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So no one's ever answered that question. No, it's wrong because you're supposed to stone them. Nobody ever said that.
No.
Okay, all right. Okay, good. That's a very comforting thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, you're wrong to tell me that I'm wrong. Moral relativism. So,
Yes.
that is pretty self-contradictory, isn't it?
Yes, but the fun part about it is this is exactly what people are saying, although they're not saying it in those words, but that's the message.
You're wrong to tell me you're wrong, but I'm right to tell you that you're wrong for telling me that I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think I say something like that to where, we could say, well, you're wrong for telling me that I'm wrong to tell you that you're wrong. I mean, this can just go on forever. How long you want to play this game?
Oh, I love this one. Follow your heart. It never lies.
One of my favorite chapters, emotionalism. So in emotionalism, we are discussing how basically society has dumped all ways of knowing absolute or dumped all ways of being able to find truth and believing it exists. And so what has now entered that void is emotions, and the strength of someone's emotions is what determines how true something is. And so here's a passage that I have for that. The problem with using our emotions for determining truth is that they first have to be conformed to truth in order to tell us anything useful. For a compass to work, it must be first magnetized. Otherwise, it won't point to true north. Disciplining our emotions with truth is like magnetizing our emotional compass. We can follow our emotions, but only after we have made sure that our emotional compass is pointing in the right direction. Too many people today determine truth by their emotions, yet have not bothered to magnetize their emotional compass. They all say, let's go north, and then proceed to walk in all different directions, trying to convince everyone else to follow them. Instead of disciplining their emotions to match reality, they are trying to make reality match their emotions.
And this has become part of it's becoming part of our jurisprudence. Okay?
Yes, it is.
It's becoming part of how we judge people's behavior. So a person makes a remark, or a person express it. Okay, there are so many minefields out there on
Can I share
please.
Okay, so there's something that just happened. It was up in Canada, and it was surrounding a political election of some sort, where one of the political what's it called, the person who's running the candidate was I have to remember. I think it was a transgender woman, so it means it was a biological man who identified as a woman. Well, there was somebody who wrote a pamphlet regarding this candidate that referred to him as a biological male.
Well, that's wrong. It's just wrong. I mean,
he was fined $55,000, and the judge ruled that even though the evidence was true, that because it made this person basically hurt their feelings, that truth and reality did not matter. It's like a judge literally said that the evidence and reality didn't matter.
It's happening on college campuses all the time.
Oh, yeah.
People are being dragged up before before disciplinary boards and not given any representation and not even sometimes allowed to know what the accusation is until the verdict has been put down on them. And so I'm wondering if it's like, okay, if that's the way this game is going to be played now, let's say that I ask a woman, let's say I'm dating, I'm a college kid, and I've tried to follow all the rules, and I ask a girl if I can kiss her goodnight because I thought we were getting close enough, and she takes offense and she goes and reports me. This is actually happening. Mm. They're being accused of harassment for asking for a kiss.
Oh, goodness.
Or let's say I make a remark, like for instance the one you just quoted about, he's a biological, he still has the male chromosomes, not the female.
Yeah.
And then I get hauled up before a review board in a university. Perhaps my only defense will be to say, I feel misinterpreted and attacked, and I just feel so oppressed because of that. And maybe, maybe that is a defense that would work. It's worth a try because nothing else works with these people.
It would definitely be worth a try. That's for sure. If I found myself in that situation,
it's we've come to a very dangerous place. I mean, between that and between the linguistic theft, we're basically in a very Orwellian type of world where, so anyways,
that brings up an interesting point because sometimes there's just not enough outrage going on. I mean, it would feel like there might be, but
that sounds like a segue of
it could be a segue,
and it might actually give me enough time to actually cue it up because I was about to
okay, but I can ignore messages, but you ignore my messages for.
I'm looking right at them. I don't.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why is my share button not working? Okay, because
I don't know. How about your Sunny button? Oh, wrong era.
They say our love won't pay the rent. Okay, anyway. Okay, have those boring family dinners become unbearably tedious? Do you wonder when someone will invent a board game that gives your life a real purpose? Do you want to be part of something bigger than yourself while remaining the center of your universe? Then we have just what you're looking for. Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they're white males. No unfair inequality promoting dice in Where's the Outrage. The rules for taking turns are simple. Each player gets points for being in an oppressed group. Turns are taken in the order of the most points. Next, you choose a bankroller, also known as the game's George Soros. Soros distributes the game cards. And then once you have those and you've selected your game pieces, you can begin. Each player chooses a piece, places it on the forward space, and Briannold is an African-American, Native American, non-binary female. So Briannold gets to go first, and Briannold chooses to go to the Christian-owned bakery first, grabs her free lawyer's card, camps out on the property, and now she's also entitled to her next move. And if she happens to find, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I don't know Briannold's gender. But if Briannold finds themselves in the near the free speech zone, they just blow off those fascist white supremacists and their stupid free speech with an entitlements card. Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they are white males.
You really gave that one a lot of thought. I'm impressed.
Thank you very much.
Isn't that where we're at though today? And that's why the book like you have here is really important because the kids need to understand what's going on, to ask the right questions, to have the right definitions, or they're not going to know how to respond in culture today.
Yeah. So here's an interesting title: Just Worship Something.
Yes.
Pluralism. And when most people hear the word pluralism, I don't think they usually think of worship. So how does this connect?
So the idea behind this, and this was originally titled something else, but then I changed it to this because this seemed to be the theme that kept popping up throughout her chapter, is this idea that we just need to be worshiping something and it doesn't really matter what it is. And so in this kind of melting pot of all the different religions, all we want is for people to worship something, and it's equally pleasing to God. And so I'd say out of the whole book, this one is most gospel oriented, where Catherine really lays it out unapologetically of what Scripture says of no, God is not pleased with just any kind of worship. He specifically wants worship to himself in truth and in spirit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
The word worship comes from our word worth.
Mm-hmm.
And we read it. I mean, when we hear the song, thou art worthy, O Lord, immediately we know we're worshiping, you know. So whatever you think is the most worthy thing is what you worship.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, that isn't even God. It's some moral precept.
Yeah.
Has a higher place, or some cultural value, social value. It seems like social values today are the idols.
Yeah.
Our society's idols. So the next chapter kind of goes along with that. It's I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I only hear that like a million times.
Yes.
How can you be religious or not religious and yet spiritual?
So this really goes into how the New Age movement has been infiltrating some of the Christian writers, but also just in general of youth, and especially millennials, just kind of rejecting the idea of religion and then kind of redefining spirituality in this terms of, you know, being one with the earth. And she goes, Elisa is an incredible writer, and so she kind of goes through the main 4 things, which is God is all and all are one. Congratulations, you're God. So God, the God within, relativity, and meditation. So she she goes into that.
That sounds like the lyrics to "I Am the Walrus." When I am you, you are he.
You're me, and we are all together.
That's about right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Sitting on a cornflake. Here, we can do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Waiting for the band to come. Yeah.
Oops, I gotta go back. Sorry. You know, that was right. I was right the first time.
Yeah.
I get the impression you might, like, when I see this title, I just wonder, do you watch any Jordan Peterson videos?
I do.
I thought you might. But he's expressing an idea that I mean people have had for decades, so a century. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, we've just passed the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and it turned out within a couple of generations it was a flat out failure.
Yeah.
You don't see all of the experiments of Mao Zedong were failures. Mm-hmm. Cuba is an island. A monument to failure. Mm-hmm. So is North Korea, and yet people are saying, when I try it, when I have the unique insight into Marxist dogma, I know how to make it work. So, what do you say to that?
So here's a kind of the position that I say on kind of the conversation that I hear. Talk to any Marxist and point out all the failed communist regimes of the past and present, and they'll say, well, none of those countries did it right. If you can just do it right, it'll work. In some ways, they are correct. When you read Marxist literature, you'll notice it completely ignores original sin and human nature. Marxism could theoretically work as long as you don't have those 2 little factors at play. Good luck with that. And so one of the themes about the Marxism that we found is it really redefined what original sin and what redemption are. And so it is essentially its own complete religion in some ways. And so it just redefines original sin as capitalism and exploitation. And we just have to be saved from that and go into communism, and then, kumbaya, we can all get along. But it's a lot more deep than that. But one of the reasons also that I include this is May 2018. So that would just be last year, which is when we were writing this. Teen Vogue had 2 different articles back to back. One come out on capitalism, basically teaching your preteen that greed is good is the philosophy of capitalism, and then another article on Karl Marx and what a misunderstood philanthropist he was, basically. And so this is the kind of stuff that's coming out in Teen Vogue, and so this is very relevant.
a guy with no money who mooched off his friends was a philanthropist?
I know, right?
I think
They
not.
don't go into that part.
Yeah, well, for some reason, the title of this chapter made me think of that movie series, The Expendables.
Mm.
I mean, males are expendable in the ideal world, aren't they?
According to the modern feminism, yes, they are.
They're trying to figure out how can we have a future world without men.
Yeah,
many of them are trying to figure that out.
There's a girl named Summer Yeager, formerly Summer White, and she actually went out to one of the women's. She does this show called Sheologians, which is.
Oh, I've heard it.
Yeah, and she went out and she interviewed people at the Women's March. They were holding these signs that says the future is female, and she's kind of asking the camera, "Where are we going to get more females from?" there's a lot of flaw in this plan here.
So that's what you're encountering in this chapter, right?
Yeah, we're talking. We definitely talk about what are the good parts of feminism. We go through the history of feminism. What can we affirm, and then what are the lies that are sneaking in, and how do we address this with our little girls, and especially our little boys who are just getting beat up. I mean, I'll say it; they're straight up getting beat up.
Yeah, the Christianity needs a makeover. Boy, I've heard that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If we would just get rid of all the doctrine.
Yeah, that's all we need. I mean, so obvious.
If we would just take everything out of it that makes Christianity Christian, then we would have a better Christianity. Right?
This chapter actually had the original title was like purging Christianity from all the icky parts. But we decided that was a little bit too. Let's make it a little bit more of a bridge than something that would make someone who identified as progressive just immediately put it down. So Christianity needs a makeover is something that Elisa, that is basically her specialty. In fact, she has a book that's coming out that she signed with. Who she signed with? I can't remember. But it's going to be on progressive Christianity.
Okay. Chapter 16 has the whole group there. These are the mama bears, right?
Yes.
How to take all this information and roar like a mother. And as I pointed out before, I'm genuinely afraid to use that hashtag on Twitter.
But you should, and you will, so to help promote the book.
Yes, I will. But and only you guys could get away with it. So there's a game plan. If somebody buys this book, there is a how to use this, because some people might be overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, and so basically this chapter is a message from each of our mama bears to the reader, and just kind of encouraging them and saying what do you these are the main points to take away from this. But it's really just a lot of encouragement. In fact, I had a woman in the launch group who was starting to feel a little bit discouraged, and I said, before you do anything, skip ahead to chapter 16 and just read that, because it's like you can sometimes feel like, oh, there's so much information, I didn't know this, and then you start getting all condemning on yourself, which women are really good at beating up on themselves. So I said, skip to chapter 16.
I'm really good at that too.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a launch group.
Yes.
Is this what they do now with new books? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's a group of people who will get an advanced copy of the book. And so we've been going and having discussion every week. And then that way, when the book comes out, you have people that have already read it and who are committed to promoting it in their social media and giving honest reviews about it. And so, yeah, so it's pretty common to do nowadays.
Yeah, it's hard to. I have a friend who was an editor at Crossway Books till he retired. He edited a lot of well-known books, and he was telling me how much the industry had changed in his career, and how much he's kept up a little bit, and how different it is now that he's retired. So, yeah. So, wow, what do you got to say, Don, to this?
Well, I'm saying, number one, something I say pretty frequently: the time that we live in today is more like the first century than any time between those two periods. In the first century, you had largely pagans coming into the church and being taught a new worldview after having accepted the Savior. Today, we're losing a fair amount of the church to paganism. And so I think a book like this is really necessary, because the training needs to start with our kids when they are little, not the week before they go off to college.
Yes. Yes.
This is a
And-
very, yeah, go ahead.
And it happens at home. I mean, Joy and I did it, but my kids grew up in a home of two apologists, so that just sort of goes into territory. Others feel overwhelmed, and I think that's why this is important, because it says, Mom, yes, you can worry about the Cheerios up your kid's nose and teach them about worldviews.
And the feedback that I've gotten from the launch team is that the women, number one, they say these are things that they've seen, but they didn't have words for it.
Right.
And they feel like this book is finally giving them words to be able to discuss this and to combat these lies. But second, they feel the word that kind of keeps coming up is people are feeling really empowered, because when you can really get a grasp and an understanding on something, and it's not just a long list of facts that you have to memorize, when it's something that clicks in your head and it makes sense to where it's, again, I always used to tell my students, if you can make this make sense, you don't have to memorize anything. And so this book is making the world make sense. And I have women that are just saying, thank you. I feel like I can actually tackle this. And so I didn't want it to be something that made women feel more burdened, like it's just one more thing that they're having to do. And I think that we really did hit that mark, because that's the feedback that I'm getting.
Well, and that is really, really important. I know sometimes, now that's the difference between how guys, and I do believe that there's only two, genders. And remember, I'm so conservative, I can't turn off even when I'm driving. So if you're offended, too bad. But, generally guys tend to view things as tasks. And so if I'm dealing with a question of the problem of evil, for example, it's a task. It's a problem I'm trying to solve. Whereas if a woman asks me about the problem of evil, it is usually because she has a friend who just had someone they lost in their lives, or they're trying to minister to somebody their friend was diagnosed with cancer, and they're looking for a way, how can I help my friend?
Yeah.
So even our approach is different, which I think makes this important, because they're saying, you can do this. Yes, we can give you vocabulary, but this is what your kids are encountering.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking on that gender difference, I just recommend anyone who wants to explore that idea more. There's an article out called Yes, Women Need Apologetics, but more importantly, Apologetics Needs Women, that kind of discusses the gender differences and why women are so important to apologetics, and what we're bringing that is different than what has previously been out there with kind of more of a male-dominated field. And I'm seeing women respond to this. I'm seeing them respond to just kind of this new approach, and it's exciting.
Well, if you're, if this book, as I anticipate, it will have an impact on the next generation, which is really the ultimate goal, not only on the women who read it, but on the children that are going to be taught by those women, and hopefully their husbands as well.
Mm-hmm.
If this has the impact that I believe it will, your husbands will rise up and call you blessed, as it says in Proverbs 31, because that really is, the Christian fathers don't want to see their kids depart from the faith any more than Christian mothers do, and they need all the help they can get in preventing that from happening.
Okay, and we are running over what we expected we probably would, because one thing, we're just long-winded. And the other thing is,
and this was a very worthwhile book. This was a very worthwhile book. We highly recommend it. Mama Bear Apologetics.
So, Ron, why don't you walk us out of here?
Why don't I? Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services comes from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and Dia Poser. Our Mormon archives manager is Polly Gamus. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is Ode Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yolig Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are totally responsible for this content, but you will not be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never
That's totally by design, and that's why we have those lawyers. So, okay.
So you two will hold on. We're going to say goodbye to everybody else, and we're going to end the broadcast.
Adios.